It's our turn, episode number 39, Space-Themed Games. In this episode, I welcome my husband, Mark, and Jesse Metcalf to the show to talk about our favorite space-themed games. I also have an interview with Eerko and Suzan Vissering about their Board Game Stats app, and Jesse talks about space-themed role-playing games.
This is the Dice Tower Network, adding games to your wish list since 2005.
Hosting for this episode is generously provided by our fantastic patrons on patreon.com. If you'd like to help us out by pledging $1 per month or more, please visit patreon.com/ourturnpodcast. We'd like to send a shout out to our newest patrons, Nicholas, Megan, and Samantha. Every dollar helps to keep this show going strong. Thank you to all of you. Hi, and welcome back to Our Turn Women on Gaming. I'm Cathy Ford. Today we have a lot planned for you. Space-themed games is a big topic, and we're going to address just a small part of it. But first, I wanted to share with you what I've been playing lately. My very first Kickstarter game has arrived. It's called Trickster Champions of Time, and it was designed by Daniel Solis and published by Action Phase Games. I backed this project because I'd been informed that my gaming experience was lacking trick-taking games. Since backing this project, I have been introduced to Hearts, which is a very old trick-taking game that you play with a regular deck of playing cards. So this wasn't my first trick-taking game, but having that experience has made learning this game a bit easier because the basic understanding of trick-taking games was already there. Unlike Hearts, you actually do want to collect tricks in this game because if you have the most of any given suit, you don't score those cards. However, if you tie in a suit or you don't have the majority, you score 1 point for each card of that suit. Like Hearts and other trick-taking games, you want to have the lowest score to win. In addition to the suits, each card has a hero pictured on it, and each hero has his or her own power that you have to implement when the card is played. In each game, there are 7 heroes included. However, the base game comes with 23 different heroes to choose from, and this makes each game different. The art on the cards was done by the wonderfully talented Beth Sobel, and the heroes are a diverse bunch from around the globe and throughout time. I did find it funny that the hero pictured on the box is not included in the game. It's not necessarily a bad thing, just a bit odd. The game is played across 3 hands of cards. I've played both the 2-player variant and the 4-player game and enjoyed both styles. Each round starts with a leader and a trickster. The leader is the first player to play a card. The person to the leader's left is the trickster and gets to determine what the other players have to play. For example, if the leader plays an orange-suited nomad, the trickster can determine if everyone else is going to play orange-suited cards, nomad cards, or not match anything, which means that each player has to play both a suit and a character that nobody else has yet played into the round. The first player that cannot play a card into the established pattern collects the trick. If everyone around the table is able to play a card, then the trickster collects the trick and becomes the new leader. The box says that this game plays in about 30 minutes. I'd say that's true for the 2 to 4 player game for sure, if you don't have anyone that suffers from analysis paralysis. This game can tend to trigger analysis paralysis because you have to pay close attention to the suits and the heroes. Also, understanding the hero powers can play into your strategy of what you play and when. Some hero powers allow you to move cards from your tableau to someone else's or vice versa, or take cards from or put cards into a public pool called the trash. These hero powers definitely influence the game. In spite of the AP issue, I really enjoyed playing Trickster. The cards are good quality and easy to shuffle. I like that there are so many different heroes to choose from when constructing a deck. I'd like to give this game a try at a higher player count and see how that plays. I also want to explore the other hero powers that I haven't had a chance to play with yet. On the Our Turn rating scale, I give this game a good solid 4. If you like trick-taking games, this is a nice variation on that mechanic. For my next game, I want to talk about an old gem. Mark and I went to a library game day last week and took one of our favorite older games with us in the hopes of playing. That old gem was Power Grid, published in 2004 by Rio Grande Games and designed by Friedemann Friese. This is a favorite game for both Mark and I. It's the first auction-style game that I was introduced to in the hobby, and it's another game that we have collected all of the expansions for, and there are many. In Power Grid, once you've chosen a map and gotten the game set up, gameplay starts with everyone choosing, bidding on, and buying a power plant at auction. These can be somewhat effective power plants that can run on more than one type of fuel and power 1 to 2 cities, or power plants that require 3 coal just to power 1 city. Very inefficient. Once the auction round is over, players buy resources that their power plants need to run. Players are restricted to buying only up to twice what it takes to run that plant. However, if you have the money available, this is a great way to drive up the cost of resources for your opponents if you're the first or second in the buying order. Next, the players take turns buying city contracts. The first players into a city can buy in for $10 or 10 electro, 10 credits, whatever you want to say, and have an exclusive access to that city until the second stage of the game is tripped. Then the cost for the second player to go into that city goes up to 15, and then to 20 when stage 3 is tripped. After the buying is done, everyone determines how many of their cities can be powered by the plants and resources on hand, and everyone gets paid accordingly. In this session, we played the United Kingdom map that includes England, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and Scotland. Because we only had 3 players, Mark, myself, and a member of our gaming group, CJ. Hi, CJ. We only got to play in 3 zones, so we chose Southern England, Wales, and Ireland. Ireland had the restriction of not being able to use nuclear power plants, and there were no network connections between Ireland and Britain, so jumping from one island to another cost an additional $20 of connection cost, plus whatever the city cost was. Mark and I managed to tie with CJ close behind. Both Mark and I were able to power 15 cities at the end of the game, which, for a 3-player game, is the endgame condition. In Power Grid, money at the end of the game is the tiebreaker, and in this case, that left Mark as the winner. This game has excellent components that stand up to lots of gameplay. We've owned this game for years, and the boards, cards, and tokens are all holding up very nicely. It's the game boxes that need some attention to keep from falling apart. I looked around for an organization solution or replacement box that could hold all of the maps and components, but so far none exists. Right now, we have everything stored in the base game box and a second box that Rio Grande Games included with one of their map expansions when they realized that the game had outgrown the base box. We have to rubber band the 2 boxes together. It would be really nice to have a solution that is a whole new box with an organizing solution and a handle for carrying everything securely. If you make such a thing, please contact me on Twitter and let me know. I will always give this game a 5 on our Turn rating scale. It's a classic that everyone should try, and if you like it, add it to your collection. Thankfully, this is one Rio Grande game that is not out of print. Finally, I just want to revisit the Lord of the Rings dice building game. I talked about this game in episode number 38, so I won't rehash everything I said here. I just wanted to report that my niece Nicole, her boyfriend Kyrie, Mark, and I sat down and played this game as a true 4-player game, and things went much better and more smoothly than in our previous attempts. We, of course, used the revised rules that you have to download from Board Game Geek, and the game played in about 2 hours rather than the 30 minutes advertised on the box. I would say that this game is best played with 4 players, and I would not recommend it for less than 4. It's just too hard to try to defeat Sauron's minions with less than 4 players. It's not easy to beat them with 4 players, but it is at least doable in a reasonable amount of time. At this point in time, I am giving this game a 3.5 on the Our Turn rating scale. And that's what I've been playing. You've heard us referring to and rating games by a rating scale. Here's how we're using this scale. 1. Give me back the time I spent playing it. 2. Has great potential as kindling. 3. Decent with some bugs. 4. A good, solid game. And 5. Buy this now.
Hey, this is Jesse, talking to you about space-themed role-playing games, as space theme is the topic for the podcast this time around. There are a lot of space-themed role-playing games out there, thanks to the advent of the internet and the boom of role-playing games from the 90s forward. We've seen a lot of space-themed games come and go, and a lot of role-playing games come and go. So, rather than tell you about the ones that are my absolute favorites, why don't I tell you about ones that have some staying power, that have existed in one form or another for quite a long time. This might give you a gauge of these have such staying power. Maybe I should check them out. The first one I want to talk about has pretty much been around since 1977 in some form or another. It had some brief breaks where it was out of print, but it's been going strong since, and that game is Traveler, probably the oldest space-themed role-playing game out there. It is a space opera. It's very much in the genre of hard sci-fi. I mean, it does have psionics and some other things that one might deem implausible in the hard sci-fi genre, but for the most part, it embraces hard sci-fi. The original edition was published by GDW Games in 1977. It uses simple mechanics. It's basically 2d6 plus a stat versus a difficulty. That is pretty simple as far as game mechanics go. What gives this game its depth are a variety of things, the first of which is character creation. There's an actual life path you follow. You roll a basic set of stats, and then you get to decide what career path you want to attempt to get into. And you have to have certain prerequisites to get in each path, and you might have to make a die roll. But you could choose any of them. You could be something as simple as an entertainer or a merchant, or you could get complicated like a corporate agent or a military officer. Each career path gives you a base set of goals, and then the longer you stay in that career path, the more terms you serve, the more skills you get on various tables. Also, the longer you're in these paths, the more benefits you get for mustering out or retiring you will achieve. Another thing that's neat about the life paths is there are a chance of mishaps during these life paths. You'll roll on events, and one of them could be a mishap. In the original Traveler game, this could be up to and including character death. So you might have to start a new character just in character creation. That might be a little more extreme than some role-playing gamers want to go through. So the latest edition of Traveler is by Mongoose Publishing. They just put out a second edition of their version of Traveler in 2016. The mechanics pretty much have stayed the same. I mean, rules have been streamlined. It's a little less intense. I think the death and character generation is now more of an optional rule. But you can still have mishaps that could permanently affect your stats or skills or other things. Overall, if you're looking for something that's got a lot of crunch to it, it keeps track of fuel. It keeps track of cargo, the weight of your ship, a lot of little bookkeeping things. It can be a little mathy at times. But if you're looking for something with a crunch, with a universe that has been well developed for, 40 years now. That's a long time. The original Traveler universe has been developed, and it's quite amazing to have a game this long out there that isn't Dungeons & Dragons. So again, you're looking for hard sci-fi, crunchy, well-developed universe. Traveler's a good one to check out. The next two I want to talk about deal with very famous intellectual properties. Getting into role-playing, it's nice to have something to latch on to that's familiar, and why not an IP that you love? So we'll talk about the two, and they're at each other's throats from time to time, the fans are. I love them both. I'm one of those people who are like, hey, both of these are good, so embrace them for what they are. The first one I'll talk about is Star Trek. The original Star Trek role-playing game came out in 1983, published by FASA. You may know them. They also published a little game that was popular on the tabletop called BattleTech. They've been around at least until they closed their doors sometime, maybe early 2000s, but they had a lot of success in the 80s and 90s, and BattleTech was one of their flagship products, but they also published the first Star Trek role-playing game. It had basically the original series and a couple of motion pictures to work off of, and they extrapolated a lot from that. Some of the Romulan ships they developed I thought were really cool. They had a neat bird theme to them, keeping with the whole warbird idea of the Romulans. It had a starship combat system that was a little less rigorous than Starfleet battles, but still kept track of energy. It still had all the bridge positions, and it was quite robust. Sadly, this is the only edition of the Star Trek role-playing game I ever got a chance to play. It used a D100 mechanic, and much like Traveller, since you're a Starfleet officer, you go through basic, you pick your branch, whether you want to be in operations, command, or science, and then you go on tours of duty, and then the number of tours is random. What you serve on those tours are based on your successes and your skills. You eventually might get up to a Constitution-class starship, the big guy of the time in Star Trek. So again, I love the life path system that this uses. Now, here's the exciting part. Several companies have made Star Trek role-playing games. I remember Last Unicorn Games did one. I owned several books for that. Decipher did one. I still own all the books for that one. They're beautiful. I'm sad I haven't got a chance to play that yet, but the books were cool enough to just collect, plus my wife absolutely adores Star Trek, so they were keepers. Modiphius Entertainment is coming out with Star Trek Adventures this year. The PDF is already out on DriveThruRPG, and the book is coming sometime in August or September, most likely here in the States. So this uses their 2D20 mechanic. They used it in a Conan role-playing game, if I remember correctly. It's received some acclaim and buzz. Just the fact that a Star Trek role-playing game is in print is exciting. It's going to cover the entire universe from the original series all the way up through Enterprise. It will not cover the new alternate Kelvin universe movies that are out, the latest 3. But there's still plenty of material to draw from, and I'm excited. I'm a big Deep Space Nine fan. If you listen to other podcasts, there are plenty of Trek fans out there who've talked about which series is their favorite. I absolutely love Deep Space Nine. So anyway, do check out the new Modiphius Entertainment. You can check out the PDF on the cheap, see if you like it. It's reasonably priced, and if you do, go whole hog in. They are coming out with an entire Borg cube with their entire initial release stuff, which includes core book, 3 sets of dice in the 3 colors of the branches of Star Trek. They're coming out with miniatures for both the original crew and the Next Generation crew, and some Romulans and some Klingons, and they're packing all of this in a giant Borg cube container. It's pricey, but if you're a collector of Star Trek and want to play a role-playing game, it's a great way to take the dive. It's going to be an expensive dive, but a dive that's cool nonetheless. So let's get to the one I have the most familiarity with, and the other side of the rivalry, Star Wars. Star Wars, the role-playing game, was originally published in 1987 by West End Games. Now, this is a time after Return of the Jedi. The extended universe of the novels really haven't taken off quite yet. So there was a lot of room to play in. West End Games took a lot of liberties with that room and made some really cool stuff. And a lot of what West End Games did is responsible for keeping the Star Wars expanded universe alive until the novels could take off and push it forward. And then they worked together, West End Games making source books for many of the novels until they stopped publishing Star Wars. It uses a system which is now called OpenD6, which is still available. Space D6 is basically the original Star Wars role-playing game with the serial numbers filed off, and you can use it with any space setting. I really like it. I like the wild die that's implemented. You roll a number of D6. All your basic attributes have a D6 rating, and then your skills are slightly higher. You just roll those numbers D6, with 1 being a wild die. On that wild die, the 6 explodes, the 1's critical failure type thing. It's a slick system, still good, and again, you can get the basic rules for free on PDF through the OpenD6, and that rules system is still being used to develop other products, so it was a solid game. And I have played every edition of Star Wars. Wizards of the Coast had the license for a while. They made a couple of D20 versions that was basically felt like Dungeons & Dragons in space, and I didn't really jive with that. The Saga edition came out, which had a lot of the 4th edition D&D properties thrown in, and it made it a much more better game. It reminded me of the Old Republic MMO in feel and rules, and it was good. But I have to say, the latest editions that have come out from Fantasy Flight Games are amazing. They came out with 3 core books: Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, and Force and Destiny in 2013, 2014, and 2015 respectively. Now, there was some disagreement, some dislike at how they were going to split these books up, and I was among them for a little while. In fact, I was among the people who didn't know if they'd like the system at all. But once the books came out and I got a feel for them, this makes perfect sense. Especially since you see who's on the cover. Think back to A New Hope. Who are the three main sets of characters you deal with? First you meet Luke. Luke and Ben Kenobi are going to be the representatives of Force and Destiny. They have one path to walk. They're going to Mos Eisley and they meet the edge of the Empire, basically. They meet Han and Chewie and the Fringers and the Bounty Hunters and the scum of the galaxy. And that's what that book covers. And then they eventually go find Princess Leia, who becomes General Leia. And this is the Age of Rebellion, seeing this paramilitary renegade faction that's trying to overthrow the Empire. So in that fashion, depending on what kind of game you want to run, these books give you great guidance on how to run those sorts of campaigns. Do you want to be Fringers on the edge of the galaxy, dealing with Hutts, making deals, smuggling, bounty hunting, etc.? And I really do like Edge of the Empire. Of the three, that one's my favorite for the feel. Age of Rebellion very much has a paramilitary feel. The book and the game really gets into that. Force of Destiny very much deals with Force users, primarily Jedi and Sith, but there's other Force cultures out there that can be implemented. And all of these books are cross-compatible. The rules are exactly the same. The character builds are balanced amongst one another. So if you want to mix the three, go ahead. There's rules for doing that. The mechanics for these are what's now being called the narrative dice system. And it uses a bunch of specialty dice, both positive and negatives, and you build a dice pool based on a stat and a skill, and you roll it against some difficulty dice, and you can have successes and failures, and they cancel each other out, and as long as you have one success, you succeed at the action. But there's also advantage and threat symbols, and this is what's cool, because you could totally succeed at something, but have accumulated more threat than advantage, so there might be a negative side effect. For example, the roguey one of your group, a slicer, tries to pick a digital lock, and they succeed. However, they accumulate enough threat to trip the silent alarm that went off. So while the group thinks they succeeded, there's a bad side effect that may or may not become apparent soon. Or you could fail horribly, but still gain enough advantage to have your shot count for something. You totally whiff and miss the stormtroopers, but you blow up a nearby tank of fuel, which creates a massive explosion. There's rubble, there's smoke, and now all of a sudden some beneficial terrain is in between you and the stormtroopers. These are just a couple examples. There's also, on the D12 dice, there's also a triumph and a despair. These represent events of a grand scale, so to speak, these rare occurrences. A triumph means something outstanding happens, and will definitely swing the game in your favor. Despair, again, something horrible has happened, and it will swing the game. And the thing, unlike the other symbols, these don't cancel each other. They can't be canceled. You could have despair and a triumph on the same skill roll, and the GM gets to try to figure out how to weave that in. So these narrative dice really help tell a story, and what I found out recently is now Fantasy Flight's going to create a generic system called Genesis, generic system, Genesis, very clever, that's going to be used for a variety of games. And I think because they've accumulated so many IPs, including Legend of the Five Rings, and they've have their own IPs, such as the Runebound universe, that they're going to use this platform to launch role-playing games for all their other IPs and various other genres. I hope they come out with an Android RPG supplement to Genesis. I hope they come out with a Legend of Five Rings supplement. I would love to use this system for a variety of things. So the rules system, the narrative dice system, is really solid. Definitely one of the strengths of the new Star Wars game. So those are 3 role-playing games that have stood the test of time. Maybe not in its original form, but they keep coming back because fans love the IP, or they love the mechanics, or both. I certainly recommend them all. They all serve different needs. Traveler is certainly a heavier, more space opera, crunchier feel. Star Wars is definitely an epic space fantasy, space opera. It's more narrative than crunch. Star Trek can be somewhere in between the two depending on the system. But all 3 of these IPs and systems are very solid. I recommend you check them out. Anyway, that's it for me this week. You can follow me on Twitter on @JESMETCALF, Jess Metcalf. I'm also on The Geek as MadcapCH. Check me out there. I do have a blog that I update bi-weekly at this point. I've tried to keep it up weekly, but life gets in the way. Anyway, thanks for listening. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Hey everyone, this is Sarah. If you're curious on how you can support the show, here are some ideas. If you'd like to support us financially, you can support us through Patreon at www.patreon.com/ourturnpodcast. We've switched from pay per episode to pay per month. We also have a donation button on the site for anyone wanting to do a one-time donation. We have a lot of plans to improve our audio and expand the content we provide, but we need help to do so. However, we totally understand that not everyone has the funds to support us. Thankfully, there are many non-monetary and important ways to help us. Tell a friend about the show. Really, one of the best ways to support us is to spread the word to people you know. Commenting on our posts, either on the website, Facebook, Twitter, or the Board Game Geek Guild, are very helpful for us to know what listeners think and want from our show. If you think of anyone you'd like us to interview, please let us know. We'd also appreciate any shares of our posts on social media. Take pics of you playing games and post them to any of our social media avenues. We'd love to know what you're playing and maybe take a look at playing those games too. Please call our voicemail number at 916-426-2873 and leave a message or a show intro or promo. For example, you could say, "This is Sarah and it's our turn," or "This is Sarah and you're listening to Our Turn Women on Gaming." Of course, replace Sarah with your name. So there's many ways to support us, and we'd appreciate any and all of them. Thanks for listening.
So now we're getting into the hot topic of our episode, and today I am joined by two gentlemen, and I want to welcome my husband Mark to the show.
Gentlemen? Did somebody say gentlemen? I don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah, you will be a gentleman.
Yes, ma'am.
And I also want to welcome Jesse back to the show.
Hello.
So thank you for joining me, gentlemen. And today we are going to talk about space-themed games. This is one of my favorite themes in gaming. And so we have some great games to talk to you about. And by space-themed, let me define what I mean by that. Not here on Earth. So some of this will take place in space, some will take place on other planets, some will be a combination thereof. So I'm really excited to talk about this one. Mark and Jesse, I take it this is a theme that you guys like too?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite themes.
Okay. Mark, why don't you go ahead and start us off? What is one of your favorite games to play that has a space theme?
Well, one of my favorite games that's set in the vast reaches of space is one I've just really discovered recently, but has been out for quite a while, and that's Starfarers of Catan. Published in 1999 by Cosmos Games, designed by Klaus Tuber, with art by Tanja Donner. Plays 3 to 4 players in about 120 minutes, and it is a blast. It takes the Catan universe and kind of turns it on its ear, gets it out into space where you're colonizing planets. It seems more streamlined than Catan because it doesn't do anything having to do with the road building, and the alien contact is what gets you your benefits. It's really an all-around fun game. Easy to teach, easy to play. But it definitely captures the space theme. You're out exploring new planets, making contact with alien races, strange encounters in the deep black. All in all, a really good game. It's an oldie but a goodie, and unfortunately it's out of print right now. Cosmos and Mayfair Games used to make it have these great plastic spaceships that you used to keep track of everything. The problem is the plastic they used back in 1999 was kind of brittle, and so the spaceships are kind of fragile. This game is just screaming for a reprint with modern pieces.
Absolutely. The rocket ships that come with the game are reminiscent of like the Flash Gordon serials, and that really just lends to the flavor of the game. Mark, can you talk a little bit about the rolling mechanism?
Well, much like the standard Catan game, you do have to roll dice each turn to find out who produces what. Your resources are very important. That's how you build your ships and colonies and spaceports and the like. However, there's actual movement in this game because you have to move from your home world to the new worlds. That's something that isn't in the standard Catan. And what happens is these spaceships, in addition to having spots for cargo and weapons and such like, you turn them over and shake them, and there's little balls inside. And when you set them upright, 2 colored balls show up in a little clear, like where the rocket exhaust would come out. And that tells you how much you can move that turn or whether or not you're going to have an encounter. The encounters can be very lucrative or very painful depending on how you handle them. It was a novel piece of technology back in the day, and like I said, it's just screaming for a reprint.
I've never seen any game do anything even similar to that. How far you can go, or if you have an encounter. If I remember correctly, you have an encounter when the black bead drops in.
Yep, that's right.
And then the encounters, some of them are wormholes that allow you to go wherever you want on the board.
Which can be a real great benefit because you start at one end of the board and work your way to the other one. If you can go all the way down and set up a spaceport at that other end, you're going to beat people to the unclaimed planets that much faster.
And to the unclaimed alien encounters.
That too. My rating on this is a solid 5. If you can get a copy of it, by all means do so. Just be careful. 1, it's expensive. And 2, the ships, like I said, were pretty brittle plastic, so little bits and pieces will be probably knocked off if it's been played much at all. In fact, the copy that we bought at a flea market at one of our friendly local game stores, Great Escape Games. Hi, Gary. The people who owned the game before us put the little bits of plastic in a small plastic bag so we could repair it if we needed to. I thought it was pretty cool.
It was. You definitely also want to purchase a industrial size bottle of super glue so that you have it on hand.
Mm-hmm. And acetone to clean it off your fingers.
Yeah, exactly. So, Jesse, have you ever had a chance to play that one?
I've wanted to play Starfarer's Catan a lot. I've seen it before. It looks intriguing. Never got a chance to. The closest that I got to it was to play Star Trek Catan, another Catan game set in space. Also a recommendation for that. But sadly, Starfarer's has escaped my grasp at this time.
Well, if you ever come out to California, look us up and we will definitely sit you down for a game.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So what is on your favorites list, Jesse?
Well, as I said, it's one of my favorite themes. It's really hard to just narrow it down, but if you combine my favorite theme, one of my favorite themes, space, with one of my favorite mechanics, deck building, I have to talk about Eminent Domain, designed by Seth Jaffe, published by Tasty Minstrel Games in 2011. And yeah, it's a deck building game that simulates the expansion of galactic empires in space. Each player starts with a 10-card deck, like in most deck builders. These cards are made up of the basic actions or basic roles you can take on your turn. These cards are also replicated in a center row. Everyone also starts with a face-down starter planet card, representing a planet that they've discovered but do not yet control either via colonization or conquest. So every turn has 3 phases. The first is the action phase, and it's the only optional phase of the turn. Every card in your hand can be played for an action effect, and it's different based on what card it is. The basic cards either have a less powerful roll effect or have a completely different effect to draw more cards or thin out your deck. Then you get to the second phase, which is the roll phase. You pick one of the 5 roll cards out in the center row, and then you add to it any cards from your hand that have the same symbol to basically enhance or boost that roll. And then you're the active player, you get to be the leader of that roll, and you resolve how that roll takes place. And then you go clockwise around the table, much like Glory to Rome, and everyone can either follow that roll and do that same roll by playing cards from their hand, or they can dissent and draw a card from their own deck. Then finally, in the last phase, cleanup, you take all the cards you played, put it in your discard pile. Then you can discard, as the active player, you can discard any number of cards you want, but you can keep cards, unlike a lot of deck builders. And then you draw back to your maximum hand size, which starts out as 5, but some planets you obtain can increase that hand size. So, a quick rundown of the rolls. The Explorer roll basically lets you draw more planet cards from the deck and select one and put it face down in your empire. To turn these face up, you're going to take one of 2 rolls. Colonize, you can take all the cards you've played for that roll and put it under the planet to show that you have colonists there. Or if you're the leader and already have sufficient colonists there, you get to turn the planet face up, and it can be part of your empire. Maybe you want to take a more military route to victory. Then there's the warfare action, where you can collect a number of fighters from the general supply to add to your fleet. Or if you have enough fighters in your fleet already, you can conquer a planet by paying its warfare cost in fighters and putting those back in the supply. Then there's the produce trade card, which either lets you add resource tokens to empty slots on your planets, or remove those tokens to get influence tokens from the supply. Research lets you basically look through technology cards and add one to your hand. All these technology cards have a research cost, so you have to play either 3, 5, or 7 symbols to get them. And you also have to have a certain number of planets of a planet type in your tableau. Again, 1, 2, or 3, and they all have to be of the same planet type. Some of the more powerful technology cards are double-sided, and they give you an ongoing effect. You put it out in your tableau rather than in your hand, and it gives you an effect throughout the entire game. The endgame triggers when either a certain number of card stacks are depleted, or when the influence stack is depleted. Then play continues until each player has had an equal number of turns. Then you tally up your influence points from your influence tokens, your planets, and your technology cards, and the player with the most influence wins. The things I really like about this game, it's a really fast space exploration game. It's also deck building, like I said, one of my favorite mechanics. It has 3 out of the 4 X's of a 4X game: explore, expand, and exploit. So it kind of scratches some of the itch of a 4X game, but not quite. The components are great, the card art's beautiful, it's really fun and fast. Things that I can criticize about it, it lacks that final X, exterminate. I wish there was a way to interact with other players more directly, like take your fleet and conquer their planets or something like that. There's not even Dominion-like attack cards in the game. The base game doesn't have asymmetrical player powers, which I really like in a space exploration 4X game. The Escalation expansion adds some of those features in scenario play. And like I said, it doesn't quite scratch the itch of a epic space exploration game like, say, Twilight Imperium, which is like the mother of all 4X space exploration games. But what do you want from a game that takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play? It's fast, it's quick, it does the job. I give it a solid 4 out of 5, and if the expansion, which I have yet to try, adds some of those features back in, it might get bumped up to a 5.
Cool. That's one that I have seen on the shelf, but I have never seen it on the table, and so I haven't had an opportunity to play that one yet.
I've played it once or twice, and it is definitely missing that exterminate component, but you don't notice it until after the game when you're going, hey, that was a good game, but...
Yeah, and there's 2 expansions out already for this. If TMG wants to kickstart another expansion that adds that 4X back in, I'd be all over it.
Cool. All right, so probably everybody that's listening to this episode is expecting me to talk about Firefly.
You're not?
I'm going to surprise everybody and say I'm not going to talk about Firefly because I've talked about Firefly so much in the past that y'all know how to play Firefly by now. Instead, I'm going to talk about another pick up and deliver game that I really enjoy, and it makes a nice change of pace from Firefly, and that is Merchant of Venus 2nd Edition. So I first heard about this game on the Dice Tower. It is Eric Summers' favorite game of all time. And when I saw it being offered at a flea market, I jumped on it because it sounded like it was just right up my alley. It was designed by Richard Hamlin and Robert A. Kuba and published by Fantasy Flight Games in 2012. There was, of course, an earlier Avalon Hill version, and it's my understanding that the Avalon Hill version played 6. The Fantasy Flight version plays 1 to 4. And basically, the story behind it is that there was a great war, and as a result of that great war, the data for all the trading routes has been lost. And so 4 traders from 4 different races, who are the human, the Wynam, the Kosath, and the Eep Eep, have been asked to go out and find these trading routes, reestablish contact with the planets on these trading routes, and start trading. And you basically travel these routes that are on the board. How far you go depends on how you've set up your ship. And the game ends when the first player reaches a specific agreed upon monetary total. Actually, I think it says in the rules, depending on how many players are playing, is how much you have to earn. It's either 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, or 4,000 credits, dollars, whatever you want to call it, in cash and factory deed values. So this is a pick up and deliver. You go out, you find these various alien planets. Each of the planets makes different things, from entertainment videos to different kind of commodities and things like that. And you start with a basic ship. You can upgrade to other ships, which increases your ability to haul your cargo and your ability to go faster. There is a variant in the rule book that allows for PvP, or player versus player interaction. I haven't played with that variant yet. So this is a game that for me is a 5. If someone says, let's play Merchant of Venus, I'm like, yes, absolutely. I won't even suggest Firefly, because they have different angles on the pick up and deliver mechanism. They're different stories. So, I had a friend of mine, Richard Bright. Hi, Richard, who told me that Merchant of Venus killed Firefly for him, and it replaces Firefly for him. And I thought about that, and I like them both too much. I don't want to get rid of one to have the other. If Merchant of Venus comes out with any expansions, I'll invest in those too. I still need to play the new Fantasy Flight version. The neat thing that Fantasy Flight did when they republished Merchant of Venus in conjunction with Stronghold Games was that they put the older version on one side of the player board, and they put the newer version, and they put that on one side of the board. And then they have the ships are different. The player boards are different depending on which version you're playing. So I've only played the older version of it. I would like to get it to the table and play the newer version of it. This is a table hog game with lots of little bits, and that makes it different from Firefly. Firefly does have some little bits, but the little chits that you have for Merchant of Venus line up along the board and in little piles. And I think the one thing that keeps me from getting this to the table more often is that I have not yet bought the box organizer from Daedalus Productions, because that organizer, my friend Dave Mitchell, has it. Hi, Dave. And it makes setting up this game so much easier, so streamlined. So I think this game will make it to the table a lot more once we have that organizer. It just hasn't yet been a purchasing priority. So I think it needs to be, because this is really a great game. It's a lot of fun. And it's one of those games where, yeah, you're playing it for, an hour, 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours. But man, I tell you, when the end comes, it comes quick. And all of a sudden you're going, wait a minute, what do you mean it's over? So Merchant of Venus, I give it a 5 rating. Now, Jesse, have you played this one?
Again, this is another one of those games I've been wanting to play. And I did own the Fantasy Flight version for a while, but I could not get takers on it to play, so it was still sealed when I unloaded it. Yeah, bummer. However, I had a thought while you were talking. It seems to me, Firefly and Merchant of Venus, similar game. I would think, from what I've read and watched, Merchant of Venus is very much a board gamer's game. I think Firefly is maybe a little more accessible. Like, for example, my Sunday night gamers who play role-playing games primarily, they love Firefly Universe and were willing to sit down and play this game. And it's maybe not as difficult, especially with the intro scenario, to get into. So maybe Firefly has a more broader appeal, whereas Merchant of Venus has a more board gamer appeal, if that makes any sense. Do you agree with that assessment?
Actually, Jesse, I have another take on that.
Okay.
It seems to me that Firefly and Merchant of Venus are two sides of the same coin. Yes, they're both space-based pick-up and deliver games. Merchant of Venus is the more 50s chrome and glass, everything shiny and spotless science fiction vision of the future. Whereas Firefly is more the realistic, dingy, grungy, not everybody is fighting for good truth and justice in the intergalactic way. That's why these two games appeal to different groups, is because they are essentially different in attitude, but in gameplay they're very similar.
Yeah, I could see that as well. Definitely role players seem to like the Firefly universe for its flaws and its ability to find role-playing elements. So yeah, that jives.
Yeah, I actually agree with both of you. I love the role-playing aspect of the Firefly universe as well, and I like the grunge of it. Merchant of Venus it's just kind of, like Mark said, a different type of take on the space theme. And you actually get to play aliens in this. And it's interesting, all the different aliens that make up the Merchant of Venus universe. Oddly enough, Venus is nowhere in this game, which I find kind of funny, but it is a play on the title of a Shakespearean play. So one of the things that kind of excites my imagination about Merchant of Venus is that one of the aliens, for example, is microscopic, and it communicates with you by making you sneeze. And that just cracks me up. But it's an intelligent species, and they make stuff, and they want to sell it to you, so you learn to communicate with them. And another game that does this with the imaginative aliens that a lot of space games don't seem to do for some reason is Tom Vassel's favorite game of all time, which is Cosmic Encounter. I have played Cosmic Encounter once. We just bought a used version of it, so we still need to get it to the table. But when I did play that, we played a 3-player game, and just the aliens and their abilities just cracked me up. And that is one thing that I enjoy about Merchant of Venus, is that you have all these different aliens that have these different skills and abilities, and it's just a different take on, like I said, the pick up and deliver aspect of things. In Firefly, the ships have different abilities, and the characters all have different abilities, but they're all human.
Yeah.
So they also have the same human characteristics and flaws and things like that are standard. And I think that makes it a little easier to role play than, say, a virus-like and sentient species.
Yeah.
So,
one last thing, while you were describing Merchant of Venus, it immediately reminded me of a educational pick-up and deliver video game from 15 to 20 years ago called Gazillionaire, where, you play weird people who take out loans to get different ships of different sizes with different speeds and cargo, and you're hauling things like umbrellas and whipped cream and just silly kids-level stuff to various planets, and you have to watch the markets, and it's like, I could see that, the parallels between the two of them. Just, if you can find a copy of that game, I also recommend that for a fun afternoon.
Okay. So, Mark, what's next on your list?
Well, next on my list is a game that depicts not so much people or aliens in space, but how we're getting to space and how we got to space. The game I'm talking about is called Leaving Earth. It's a 2015 production of the Luminaris Group. The designer and artist is Joseph Fatula. And I had the luxury of being able to play this game when it first came out with the designer. And let me tell you, first of all, it's definitely very math intensive, because what you're doing is you are taking control in 1956 of a nation's space program. And your job is to win the space race. Now, you can do that by completing a lot of little missions or one big grand mission. You have various goals that are selected at the beginning of the game. They can be going from an easy goal of put an astronaut in a suborbital flight and return them to Earth safely, all the way to, let's put someone on the moon and bring them back. That, which would be, of course, worth significantly more points. You play until one person has an insurmountable lead in number of points from the different mission goals that are out there. And you have to take this from the nuts and bolts. You get a budget every year. It starts in 1956. And you have to spend your budget or return it at the end of the year. So what you do is you spend it on rockets that you have to test to make sure they're safe. You spend it on astronauts. You spend it on systems like how do you map the galaxy? How do you scan things? How do you make a rendezvous in space like the original, as the Geminis and early Apollos did with the module up there, so that the Apollo 11 could, undock, dock with the lunar module, and then head on to the moon. There are expansions for this game that include the outer planets, which means, yes, you could conceivably have the mission to do what they call the Grand Tour, which means that you have to launch from Earth and you hit Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto all the way out. Of course, nobody's expecting you to put a man on those, but you're doing the scan and checking for life signs. Yes, there is a mission that says you're looking for intelligent life in the solar system. The amount of math that you have to do to calculate what it takes to put a manned capsule on a planet and then bring it back home would be daunting. Except that Mr. Fatula has gone in and done the math for you, so you know how much one of these particular rockets weighs. And then they have the Juno rocket, and then they have the Atlas rocket, and they have the Saturn rocket. So you've got all the weapons that at your disposal for conquering the space race that Earth has had. And they dabble a little bit in futuristic, for longer duration missions. They have an ion drive, which NASA, I believe, is still working on. It's a great game. Bring your calculator. You're going to need it because there's a lot of math involved. And if this game does tend to lend to analysis paralysis a little bit. It'll play 1 to 5.
Even if you're not prone to.
Oh, hell yes. 1 to 5 players, and it can play anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. So you'll be at this a good long time. But if you like a good, crunchy, mathy game, I can't recommend this highly enough. This game is definitely a part of my collection. There's a new expansion that I'm chomping at the bit to get a hold of called Stations, which adds space stations to the mix. You can have things like the International Space Station and keep it going. But it's definitely a great game, and I can't recommend it highly enough.
I really enjoy this game, too. I will warn everybody that if you're trying to do a tour of the outer planets, if you haven't launched by 1972, you're out of luck. And I had to learn that one the hard way. I was ready to go in 1974.
About 2 years after I launched, as I recall.
And exactly. And you literally cannot get to the outer planets unless you launch in 1972 because the window closes for getting there. Because you have to calculate slingshots around planets and things like that. So for everything to be all lined up so that you can hit all these different gravity wells and get yourself flung all the way out to Pluto, you have to launch in 1972 in this game. Anyway, but it is a fun game. It is a really fun game. I know, Jesse, the last episode where you were guest on it, you said that you left your phone plugged in for, yes, I think it was Mansions of Madness. Yeah, you have to do that with this game too because you need your calculator to work. You can't run out of juice halfway through and expect to be able to do things quickly.
I'm not going to lie, this game sounds daunting to me, so it may or may not be my cup of tea. If I see it played, I might sit and watch for a while before I commit to it, because, yeah, it sounds fun, and I'm a mathy person, but that might be just a touch too much for my life.
I would suggest have someone teach it to you.
Yeah.
I have another game that I'm trying to learn right now. I've been asked to learn it so I can teach it to the game's owner, which is my friend Dave Mitchell, and that's High Frontier. And I asked Edward at Heavy Cardboard if he had any advice for learning to play this game, and his advice was have someone teach it to you. And I'm like, well, I'm it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this one, Find someone who has played it a few times. Mark, like he said, was lucky enough to have the designer teach it to him. But once you've played it, it's a lot of fun. And it kind of gets in your bloodstream and you're like, yeah, I need to play this again because I want to beat it.
Hey, Jesse, I'll make you a deal.
Cool.
You come out to California to play this game, have me teach it to you. I'll put my phone in my pocket. Give you an advantage.
Okay.
Maybe we can even ask Joe to come out and play it with us.
Yeah, they're California folks too,
Joe.
so we see them at cons every once in a while when we can get to them.
Right.
Joe and his wife Kate are just some of the best ambassadors for the hobby that you could ever imagine. The Luminaris group is run essentially off of their property. They do all the art themselves, and it's beautiful. They do all the pieces themselves. They even make the boxes themselves, and it's just gorgeous.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, Mark, what's your rating on this game?
We don't have a 6 yet, do we?
No.
No, this is definitely a 5, with the warnings that if you are math averse or if you are prone to analysis paralysis, this game may not be your cup of tea. But if you're like me and you like a good mathy, crunchy, hardcore space game, walk right in, sit right down, and let's play.
Okay, great. Jesse, what's up next on your list?
Well, keeping in the same vein of leaving Earth, let's go to Mars. The game I want to talk about is Terraforming Mars, a game that's been talked about a lot, and rightfully so. It is a solid game. Isaac Frixelius of Frix Games designed this, published in the States by Stronghold Games. It was published last year in 2016. It runs about 2 hours, a little less once you get everyone into the groove and know what they're doing. So yeah, basically the players are corporations working in league to terraform Mars, but they're competing. They are corporations after all. So you get victory points for terraforming, building infrastructure, doing research, and achieving milestones and awards. You begin the game with a hand of project cards. If you play a beginner corp, you get those for free. You get 10 of them. Everyone else, if you're playing a regular corporation, have to pay 3 megabucks per card, or mega credits per card, and those add up. So once you switch over to becoming one of the regular corporations, the first strategy is knowing how many cards to buy, because you're going to need those mega credits to build those projects as well. So during the game, you're going to do 4 things on the turn. The first thing is just shifting the first player clockwise. Then you're going to research. At the beginning of the game, you're given cards already. Otherwise, you're going to draw 4 new ones and decide which ones to keep if you're one of the regular corporations and buy them. After that, there's the action phase. Each player will take turns, starting with the first player, to do 1 to 2 actions on their turn. And they can play a card, they can use a standard project, they can convert greenery into trees, and that'll raise the oxygen. They can convert heat into a rise in temperature. They can use an action of a card in play. If they have sufficient goals already, they can claim a milestone, or they can fund an award for an endgame goal that they may not have met yet, but they plan on meeting later on in the game. There's a lot to do. And if your turn comes around and you have nothing to do, you have to pass, or maybe you want to pass to save resources for the next turn. Once you're passed, you're done taking actions. And there's also an action where you can sell one of your cards for a mega credit. It's not very efficient, but the real trick to that is you can use that as a stalling tactic. Maybe you need the oxygen to rise 1% more, and then you could play this card. Well, you can sell one of your cards you don't want anyway to take an action, and that way you don't have to pass. Then Corporation X across the table raises the oxygen that 1 bump, and then you can play the card you really wanted to play. So there's a little strategy there in the action phase. You can finesse some lesser things in order to save up for one big thing later. And then once everyone has passed, you can do the production phase where you produce things like steel, titanium, plants, energy, heat, and mega credits. And then you pass the turn marker, we go again. And you keep going until all the 9 ocean tiles are in play. The temperature has risen to sufficient levels, and the oxygen is, I believe, at 14%, if I remember correctly. Once those are done, the game ends. After that generation, you count your victory points based on your terraforming rating, cards in front of you, various milestones you've achieved, and various awards you've won, and the highest victory point total wins. Wow. This game, it feels epic, but it's so easy, at least for me, to teach and learn with beginning corporations without the corporate era expansion which comes with the game. If you leave it at the very basic level, even my non-gamer friends can grasp it. And one of the last games I played, I had people who aren't big board gamers at all, and one of them just dominated in the greenery department and made forests like crazy and ran away with the game. So it's very easy to pick up the basic concepts, but yet this game is so epic. By the time you're done, you've got Mars all terraformed, there's trees everywhere, oceans, cities. I've played this game at all player counts, and it's good at all player counts. It certainly shines better as a 3 to 4 player game, or as a solo game, which I've played several solo games myself, and it's a good solo game, solid solo game. It feels like there was a lot of research put into this game. Everything that's presented on the cards and everywhere seems theoretically possible. And in fact, the head of the Mars Society and the president of the Mars Society gave it an endorsement on the cover of the box. So it's got some love. Yeah, it's got some love from the scientific community as well.
Oh, that's cool.
The art's great. Most of the components are great. I'll get to that in a second. The engine building's phenomenal. You can do some amazing things on your turn once you get set up. So let's talk about the things everyone's talking about. The player boards. All right, everything's tracked with these little cubes. And if you bump your table, your cubes go everywhere. What was my production on all this again? What cubes went where? Again, I felt obligated to go on Etsy and buy a solution for that with notches, much like Scythe or something like that, where things don't fly around so much.
Right. We've seen that happen.
Oh, it's horrible.
It is.
It's like a game reset. And then, like, the cards are a little on the thin side. It's one of the few games I felt obliged to sleeve, just because it's going to see a lot of play. Those thin cards are not going to hold up. And it can be on the 2-hour side. And if you add the corporate era expansion and rules, it might get a little long, but I don't think it overstays its welcome. Overall, even with those production flaws, or perceived production flaws, I have to give it a 5. I can't give it anything higher, so a 5 will do. This game is solid. It's number 7 on Board Game Geek, number 6 in the strategy category, nominated for a Kennerspiel des Jahres of 2017.
It won.
Tons of Dice Tower. It did win?
It won.
Good. Yay.
No, I don't think it won the Kennerspiel.
Oh, did it?
No, but they did win the Dice Tower.
That's
Dice
right.
Tower Best Strategy.
Best Strategy Game of the Year and Best Game for a New Designer, I believe.
Right. Can you believe it's his first game?
Well, you know.
Yeah, talk about setting a high expectation.
Yeah, I mean, it was nominated for the Game of the Year for Dice Tower, and it won like a few other awards. It was in 2016, the Golden Geek Awards. It was nominated for Game of the Year, strategy board game, solo board game. I mean, this game. I mean, we've seen this, and we've seen Gloomhaven, 2 amazing games that are basically first or second time goes for designers. Just destroy the BGG rankings. I mean, we live in an exciting time for board games, and this is one of the best out there, guaranteed.
It's a golden age, that's for sure.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
The worst thing that happened to Terraforming Mars this year is it came out the same year that Scythe came out.
Yeah, Scythe is a monster to compete with, and I have to say, yeah, it's a solid game. That's a hard race right there.
Oh, you know what? I just looked it up, and you're right. It did not win the Kennerspiel des Jahres. The Exit Games won. So, yeah, it definitely deserved the nomination for sure.
Now, of course, then that begs the question. If the component quality had been as high a level as the gameplay, what might have been?
Yeah, what if the price tag was bumped up $10 or $20 and you got Scythe-like quality on the components?
Absolutely.
Because you have to think that nagging thing dropped it a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I know we haven't bought this game yet. It is high on our purchase list, but I also plan to buy the Broken Token Organizer, which comes with wooden player boards that will hold the cubes in place. And so, you know, this organizing solution also solves that problem. And
that was very smart on their part. My organization solution for this, outside of the player boards, was to buy a $3.50 Plano container and a 99-cent 800 count card box to cut up. I am very frugal when it comes to organization. I mean, God bless you if you want to buy those big fancy organization kits, but when it comes to that, I've spent enough on this game. I'm going to be a little more frugal in that department.
You know, I did that initially for Firefly. I had, lots of things stored in plastic bags. I had those plastic crystal card holders that hold like 300 cards. I had, I think, 4 of those for all the decks for Firefly. and lots of plastic bags to hold all the bits and chits and everything. And then all the maps were in a second box. And then I would rubber band the whole thing together. And it was just such a production to set up. So when the Broken Token came out with the big damn crate, that was perfect because you just pull things out of the box, you set them on the table, and you start playing. And a lot of these organizers do the same type of thing with their games. So that's why I'm a huge fan of those.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I am jealous of your crate. That looks amazing.
Yeah, they are definitely worth it. They are definitely worth the money, in my opinion. So my last game that I'm going to talk about is Battlestar Galactica. And this was designed by Corey Konacheka. I apologize, Corey, if I butchered your last name. It's published by Fantasy Flight Games. It came out in 2008. It has, I believe, 3 expansions, which we own all of them. And my rating for this game is a 5. If somebody asks me to bring it so that we can play it, I will bring it and it will hit the table. And in our little game group, we're the ones that own BSG and love it. And we have the Broken Token organizer for it, which is well worth the money for it. Because again, that was another one that used to have to fit into 2 different boxes, and now it's all in one. This is based on the TV show that came out, I believe it was 2004 or 2005 on the Sci-Fi Channel. Now, for those of you who were born in the 1970s or before, you might remember Battlestar Galactica in about 1978 or 79. The sci-fi version of the show is based on that original property, but they made it much grittier, much less glossy, but they kept almost all of the character names and positions and all of that, and then they added to it. So basically the story behind this is that long ago humans left their home planet of Kobol and they went and settled in the solar system that had 13 planets that could be terraformed to support human life. And over a period of centuries, they became more advanced and they developed robotic servants, which they called Cylons. Well, at some point, the Cylons also attained sentience and rebelled. There was a big war. The Cylons left the system that the humans were living in and went and founded their own home. And then 50 years later, they came back and decimated the human colonies. And the Battlestar Galactica is basically a spacefaring version of an aircraft carrier. And apparently there was one Battlestar for each of the 12 colonies. And the Battlestar Galactica represented the colony of Caprica and was about to be retired when the Cylons attacked. It was about to be decommissioned. And it turned out to be the only Battlestar, so they thought, to survive the onslaught. And they gathered all of the humans who were in space at the time in faster than light ships, and they got the heck out of Dodge. And the Cylons pursued. So that is the basis for this game. The thing that they discover at the end of the pilot episode is that some of the models of Cylons look like humans, and it's hard to tell who's what unless you see 2 copies together, because there are many copies of these different models of Cylons. So this is a social deduction game, and you're trying to get to either Kobol, which is the original planet of the humans, or you're trying to get to the 13th colony, which is Earth. Getting to Kobol takes 8 jumps. Getting to Earth takes 10 jumps. And you're also trying to suss out who are the traitorous Cylons that are, trying to throw a monkey wrench in things. You have limited resources. You have limited food, population, morale, fuel. Am I missing any, Mark?
Food, fuel, population, and morale are the 4 categories.
Okay. And if you get any of those resources to 0, game over. The humans have lost.
Or as the Cylons like to say, yay dead humans, yay stalled humans, yay sad humans, and yay starving humans.
Exactly. So basically, at the beginning of the game, everybody's dealt a loyalty card, and everybody picks up these cards and looks at them at the same time. And if you're Cylon at that point, you need to plan on playing the long game. You need to keep your identity secret while still messing with the humans if you can. You need to try and throw monkey wrenches in their efforts to get through these crisis cards. There's a huge stack of cards, and everybody draws a crisis card at the end of their turn. And then the entire group has to try to overcome these crises together. And you do that by playing cards from your hand that are worth points and their different skills and abilities. And it's just a lot of fun to try and suss out who is the Cylon. Sometimes I played in one game where this one guy was just a jerk. I mean, that was just him. He actually wasn't a Cylon. He was just a jerk. And I was in a position where I could send him out the airlock. And he's like, but I'm not a Cylon. I'm like, I don't know that. And so I had him executed. And the neat thing about this game is if your character gets killed, no problem. You just pick another character and you start playing with that character. And that's actually in the rules. That's not a house rule or anything. And you get new loyalty cards and all of that. And I think I ended up executing his second character as well. And neither time was he a Cylon. But when you do that, it hits morale. So yeah, I took a risk, and he was not happy with me for sure. But I was sure the second time he was. I wasn't sure the first time, but there was a chance he was. And then the second time, I was sure he was. And the Cylons were just laughing at me that time. But one of the fun things in our group, it's kind of fun, mildly irritating, is that I tend to play the same character, which is Laura Roslin. She's the president of the colonies. And Mark likes to play Admiral Kane or Admiral Adama, who are in charge of the 2 battle stars that actually ended up surviving the Holocaust. And we always get called right from the beginning, Madam Toaster and Admiral Toaster, because probably about half the time we end up being the Cylons. But it's still fun. It's a lot of fun. This is on its way to becoming our New Year's Eve tradition. We've played this the last 2 New Year's Eves, and I think if we make it to a third year, that makes it a tradition, don't you think?
Yeah, and just what people will warn you is that if Cathy and I both get locked up as toasters, as Cylons in this, be afraid, be very afraid, because we will mess up your stuff.
Yeah, as I've mentioned on the show before, when Mark and I play games, we play for blood.
In this case, lubricating oil.
Whether it's against each other or against anybody else, it's pretty rare that we go easy on anybody. But Battlestar Galactica is a fun game. It's one of those games that can actually turn into a party game, but you better plan on spending anywhere from 3 to 8 hours playing it if you have like 6 or 8 people. It's supposed to cap out at 6. We've played it, I think we played it last year at New Year's with 10, and we just added more Cylons. So, the bigger the party, the more chances there are at least 2, possibly 3 or 4 Cylons. So anyway, like I said, I give it a 5. Jesse, have you tried this one out?
It's on my radar.
Okay.
Like I said, love the reboot show. I played the role-playing game for it, but have yet to try the board game. I know some friends who own it, so I will have to hit them up sometime.
Well, I heartily recommend it. It's a lot of fun. All right, gentlemen, anything on your short lists?
Oh, Lord, yes. Outpost was on my short list. Again, another mathy, crunchy game, building a space colony and trying to make it into the best space colony of the players. And around our group, it gets nicknamed Math because it's a mathy game. But again, that was another one that's quite enjoyable for me.
Another one on my short list is Legendary Encounters Firefly. Believe it or not, I am not a fan of all of the Firefly games. I have tried others, and I was really skeptical about Legendary Firefly because I didn't like Legendary Marvel. And I'm not a huge fan of deck builder games, but when I played Legendary Encounters Firefly, I really enjoyed it. It had a lot of meaningful decisions in it, and I would definitely give that one a 4. Of course, Firefly will continue to be my favorite. I also enjoy Outpost. That one, Outpost, I kind of have to be in the mood for, but when you're playing with 6 or 7 other people, it is a lot of fun. I enjoy the auction component in it. Jesse?
For me, to go off of Legendary Encounters Alien is also quite good if you like that franchise. The game captures the spooky feel of it because you never know where they're hiding out in the tunnels and such. Another good one, Alien Frontiers. It's a dice placement game where your workers are your dice, and you're trying to colonize a fictional planet with sections of it. It's kind of like Area Control, where Area Majority, where you're controlling sections of it, and all the sections on the planet are named after sci-fi authors, so it's a lot of fun.
Neat.
Then, of course, there's also Race and Roll for the Galaxy, which is a classic.
Yeah, I know those are a couple of your favorites. I am not a fan of those games. I just can't seem to wrap my brain around the iconography.
I liked Roll fair enough. Race was not my cup of tea. I think Eminent Domain scratches a lot of those itches with the role selection and does the same thing, but in a way I like better, if that makes sense. But those are still solid games. They're just not for me. And I will add the aforementioned Twilight Imperium if you want the epic space exploration game.
I have played Twilight Imperium. In fact, I DM'd it at one of the Conquest conventions that's held here in Sacramento. And it was funny. Again, that was a game that Dave Mitchell owns, and he asked me to teach it to him. So I decided, well, what the heck, I'll learn the game and play it for the first time as I'm DMing it. And that was fun. We ended up with it being actually a short game because we got the card that automatically ended the game after only about 6 hours.
Oh.
Only.
Yeah, only 6, but anyone who's ever played something like Master of Orion knows a game like Twilight Imperium, 6 is pretty... It's on the short side.
It is. Now, a game I'm trying to learn right now is High Frontier, and I haven't found a video yet that I've liked to try and learn this, and it's in its 3rd edition, which is also a challenge because some of the videos that are on YouTube about it are earlier editions, and so I'm trying to find one that I like that will help me learn it. So if anybody knows of any, please ping me either in the guild or on Twitter or something and let me know. And if you've played High Frontier and have any tips for learning it and teaching it, I would also really enjoy having that shared as well. So what are your favorite space-themed games? I will have that question in the guild on Board Game Geek. That's guild number 2600. And I want to hear from you. What space-themed games do you enjoy and why? All right. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen. I appreciate it. It's been a great discussion.
You're quite welcome.
Yes, this is awesome.
Great. And I hope you'll both come back again sometime in the future.
All you have to do is say the word.
Absolutely.
This is Cathy, and today I am joined by Eerko and Suzan Vissering, and they are here to tell us about their new Board Game Stats app for Android. It's been on iPhone for a while, but now I am very excited that it has come to the Android platform. Eerko and Suzan, welcome to our turn. It's your turn now. Tell us about your app.
Thank you for having us. Well, the app is mainly created to record your plays, everything you do around playing board games. So you record who's playing, what their scores are, the results of your game, and anything else you want to record actually. And it collects all those stats about the plays you record. So later you can see who wins the most and who loses all the time and has a right to complain about it a bit. And that's roughly what the main goal is of the app.
It gives me proof that I don't win games very often.
Okay, that's too bad to hear.
No, I still have fun though. So this has been out on iPhone for quite some time, and I've been extremely jealous of my co-host Sarah, who has it on her iPhone, and she raves about it and absolutely loves it. In fact, yesterday she posted a screenshot from hers showing her stats and some graphs about how she plays and how many people she plays with and all of that kind of thing. Now, this is connected into Board Game Geek, though, right?
Yes, it is. All the plays you record, you can post to Board Game Geek, so they appear there as well. But if you previously recorded your plays on Board Game Geek already, you can also import them into the app. So you can start out with some already existing stats, look at another way at them, and then continue recording and add them to Board Game Geek.
This is great. I used to use the Board Game Geek app to record my plays, but I just found it so clunky and cumbersome. But I've been playing with your app for a couple of days here, and it is not clunky or cumbersome at all.
Thank you. That's good to hear.
Now, are you affiliated at all with Board Game Geek?
No, we started it out as a standalone app just for ourselves at the beginning, as a replacement of our papers and spreadsheet and whatever we tried to keep stats around. After a while, we thought, well, why don't we put it on the internet, on the App Store? And people were enthusiastic, but also started asking to connect it to Board Game Geek, link to the games, get a picture of the game, post the plays, etc. So that's what we started to add. And that's how it grows from there.
But you can also add games yourself. You don't need to use Board Game Geek.
No, it's still completely standalone possible, but most people want to connect to the existing data.
Yeah, I've got almost a couple hundred games listed in Board Game Geek, so it's nice to be able to pull them in and see what I've played already. And now, is there a way to add to my collection through Board Game Stats, or do I still need to do that through Board Game Geek?
Collection management itself is still done on Board Game Geek. You can import the collection into Board Game Stats, so you can have a list of all the games already in there, but you can change the collection from within the app. It's something we're looking at adding in future updates, but it's not possible right now.
Okay. Now, what was each of your parts in the process of creating this app?
Well, what did you do?
Well, my idea was to record the stats, actually. Yeah. I already did that long time ago, before I met Eerko even. And then I stopped doing it when we met. We played a lot of board games, and then we wanted to record the stats. And as Eerko already said, we wrote it down during the game session, and later I have to put it in somewhere. And it was always a hassle. We played a lot of Tichu. And with teams and scores, it was always really hassle just to put all the scores in. And then Eerko said, I will fix this for you. And he did.
Well, so...
Oh, how nice.
And, I made it happen, I think.
Yeah. And over time, we both have ideas, and then we'll edit and...
Yeah. And she's my major tester, because she always finds every bug in there.
Sorry.
No, that's excellent. That's great. You want to find the bugs before you send it out to everybody else.
Yes, absolutely. And ideas how to make the interface work easily, etc. And there's a lot of ideas over in there as well.
Yeah, the challenges, expansion. I drew all kinds of pictures from it has to look like this, and then the next screen has to look like that, and he just made it.
Yeah.
Oh, we can track challenges in here too?
Well, that's an expansion that's only available in iOS for now, but we will make it for Android also.
Oh.
We wanted to release the app as soon as possible, so the extensions will come a little bit later.
Oh, well, I can't wait to have that one. I'm doing a 52-game challenge right now, and Sarah's doing a 10 by 10, which I think she's just about done with.
I think she said that in the last episode.
Yeah. And then Jessica's doing a challenge as well. She's doing a 10 by 10 and a 10 by 10 solo.
Oh, nice.
So, and then Sarah and I are both working on getting our unplayed games played. So it'd be cool to be able to track that in here too. I can't wait for that expansion to come out.
It will happen somewhere this year. Yeah,
oh, fantastic.
Both expansions that are available for iOS, that are the challenges, and the Deep Stats expansion, which gives even more stats and filter opportunities in the app, will come out for Android as well.
Do you have a target time? Target date?
Well, it's really tough to say.
When should we be looking?
Dependent on how many problems are found within the app. I must say the first problems that we fixed last week from the first release are now really starting to slowed down. So I think it's really stable right now. So I'm going to work on that soon. So, well, somewhere this year at least.
Now, did you have to learn a whole new programming language in order to create this app for Android?
Yeah, I did. At least it is programmed in Java as a programming language, which I already knew. But I had to learn the Android development platform and how Android apps are made. I did that from scratch. So I started around August last year, I think, and just built it up from there. And it's the first Android app I've made.
Yeah, and also we both don't use Android devices, so Eerko also had to learn what should an app look like, what are the rules, what do people expect, how do you navigate through an app, all that sort of thing that we knew already for iOS, but for Android was totally foreign for us.
And are the platforms dramatically different from one another?
Well, yes and no. There are some things that are really different in how they achieve certain things like animation or navigation. But besides that, basically they have the same type of device they have to run on. So they have the same limitations to work with. And I think most of that really had the same problems that had to be solved. And I could reuse quite some parts of the iOS app, luckily, for that, just the inner workings. All in all, I think they're pretty the same, actually, from a developer outlook.
Okay. Now, once you release these other two expansions, will that catch up the Android version with the iOS version?
Yeah, there's one more feature that I will also add this year, and that's the Nemestats integration, which you post to the nemestats.com website, which is mainly focused on group play. And I will add that to Android as well.
And then will you be updating them simultaneously going forward?
Yeah, that's the goal.
Okay, great. So then I don't have to wait for Sarah to inform me about something. I've got it right here on my own phone.
Indeed.
Fantastic. Well, this is very exciting. I'm very excited about having this app because I have wanted to track my plays, but I didn't like the Board Game Geek app. And then trying to use Board Game Geek on the phone is a little cumbersome because it's not set up to be mobile friendly. You know, as wonderful and complete as Board Game Geek is, it's not perfect. Nothing is, but this is a wonderful way to be able to record stats and have them show up on Board Game Geek and be able to import our collections and things like that. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was fun doing it as well.
Good. It's always good to have a passion project that other people appreciate, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely what it is.
Yeah, we live on positive response.
Yes.
Excellent. Now, where are you talking to us from?
The Netherlands, Enschede is the city we're in.
Excellent. All right. I love talking to people from all over the world. It's exciting for me. I haven't been able to travel much, but I love being able to talk to people. So how can people get a hold of you online if they have questions about the app or if they just want to connect with you?
Well, we're very active on Twitter. So you can find us at BGStatsApp. And on Board Game Geek, we have a guild. It's Board Game Stats, guild number 2246.
64.
Oh, I'm sorry.
2246. Yeah.
2246?
2246, yes. And our website is bgstatsapp.com.
Awesome. We'll have links to those in our show notes.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us on Our Turn.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes.
I hope you'll come back and talk to us some more when you have more releases coming out.
Yeah, we'll keep you informed.
Fantastic. So, wow, that was a packed episode on space-themed games. That's a topic I can talk on for a long time. I had hoped we would include some Star Trek and Star Wars themed games, but time just didn't permit. Don't worry, we'll revisit this topic again in the future. Now, what I'm looking forward to in the future, well, as soon as this episode goes live, we're going to be working to put together our Ask Us Anything episode. Many people have contributed some great questions. We're looking forward to answering them in episode number 40. Additionally, Mark and I are house hunting and getting ready to move. That's exciting for us, but it's also a big chore and a bit exhausting. Finally, I'm very excited about the announcement that the new regeneration of the Doctor on Doctor Who will be a woman. I don't know Jodie Whittaker or her work, but I am looking forward to checking her out while I wait for the Christmas special and the new season next year. As we have said on this show a number of times, it's important for girls and women to see themselves portrayed in the media we watch. I have heard some criticism that the actress cast was a white woman. I agree, it would have been even more progressive to cast a woman of African, Asian, or Middle Eastern descent. But each step forward is still a step forward and should be celebrated for what it is. I was very pleased when Freema Agyeman was cast as Dr. Martha Jones and saddened that she only lasted a single season. I was also quite pleased when Pearl Mackie was cast as Bill Potts and it was announced that she was openly gay. Again, I was disappointed when she too only lasted one season. However, these small steps should be celebrated, and I am happy to have seen them and this future step of the Doctor regenerating into a woman. Now, this is all just my opinion. I'd love to discuss this with anyone who wants to chat with me on Twitter or in our guild on Board Game Geek. That's guild number 2600. Speaking of Twitter, I run the Our Turn podcast account on Twitter, so feel free to connect with me there. I also have a personal account at Cathy's Brain, that's Cathy with a C, that I'm trying to get better about checking. I'm just having so much fun on the at Our Turn podcast account. If Facebook is your preferred social media venue, Sarah runs our page over there at facebook.com/OurTurnPodcast. Until next time, and on behalf of the entire Our Turn crew, that was our turn, now it's yours. Thank you for listening. This episode was recorded on July 17, 2017, and is written and produced by Cathy Ford and Sarah Reed with assistance from Jesse Metcalf, Eerko and Suzan Vissering, and Mark Ford. Next time is our Ask Us Anything episode. We want and encourage your questions, comments, and feedback. Please call 916-426-2873 and leave us a short voicemail, or send an email to feedback@ourturnpodcast.com. Our theme music was composed by Adriana Crickle. Please check out our show notes to learn more about the composers featured in this episode. The material in this episode is copyrighted under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. If you want to learn more about the games discussed in this episode, please visit our website at ourturnpodcast.com/episode 39. You can find a list of the games along with links to their listing on BoardGameGeek.com. We are proud members of the Dice Tower Network. You can find out about other shows in the network like the Dice Tower, Board Game Blitz, or the Family Gamers by going to dicetowernetwork.com. Thank you for your support. If you like what you heard, please tell your friends about us.